immediate right, his left, of course, is the Chancellor-elect. I think so. Joan Gable, first woman Chancellor in the University of Pittsburgh history. Goes back a few years. We'll start with opening remarks. Any folks can ask questions later. Chancellor Gallagher and Vice Chair Research Dr. Nether Shaker. Welcome your questions. If we have time, if TV wants one-on-ones, we're much better prepared for the back of the room. Chancellor Gallagher.
Good morning, everybody, being here. As Chuck mentioned, I am Douglas Browning, the chair of the Board of Trustees at the University of Pittsburgh. And with me again is our Chancellor-elect. We're very excited about Joan joining our Pittsburgh family. Chancellor Anantha, and I also like to recognize that the Vice Chair of the board, Lou Costello, is also with us. Earlier this morning, Chancellor-elect Gable received enthusiastic support from the full Board of Trustees, and she will become Pitt's 19th Chancellor and Chief Executive Officer, and the first woman in the 236-year history of the University of Pittsburgh to hold his highest office. I have a few remarks, and then you'll have an opportunity to hear from Chancellor-elect Gable and from our current Chancellor, Pat Gallagher. Following that, we'll open up the session for a few of your questions. When I first met Chancellor-elect Gable, I was immediately impressed by her vision, her drive, her experience, her sense of humor, and her understanding of the issues and complexities of leading a major research university. She joins us from the University of Minnesota system and the Twin Cities campus, where she has served as their Chief Executive Officer and President since 2019. Under her leadership, the University of Minnesota developed a new strategic plan that focuses on emphasizing student success, innovation, service, equity, and physical stewardship. During her tenure, she completed a $4 billion capital campaign that exceeded its goal by 10%. She also established a partnership with the university, the Mayo Clinic, and Google to develop new and novel platforms for higher education. Prior to joining the University of Minnesota system, she served as the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at the University of South Carolina. And prior to that, she was the Dean of the College of Business at the University of Missouri. Chancellor-elect Gable began her teaching career at Georgia State University as an assistant professor of legal studies before being named the interim director of the Institute of International Business Studies. From there, she joined Florida State University, where she was the DeSantis Professor of Legal Studies and chair of the Department of Risk Management and Insurance, Real Estate, and also served as a Legal Studies Director in International Relations. Chancellor Gable is the recipient of numerous research, service, and teaching awards, and is also a Fulbright scholar. She holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Haverford College in Haverford, Pennsylvania, and she has a JD cum laude from the University of Georgia School of Law. As you get to know Chancellor-elect Gable, Joan, I'm sure you'll be impressed by her clarity of thought, her candor, and her dedication to the task at hand. And will conclude, as I did, that she has the academic and research acumen to lead this great university. We would literally not be here today without the tireless efforts of the Chancellor Search Committee. Trustee Eva Tansky-Bloom led that committee. She is unfortunately out of town and cannot be with us today, but I want to thank Eva and Anantha for their leadership in that process. Together, Eva and Anantha led a team of 26 who included Pitt trustees, students, faculty, staff, and alumni. They worked for more than 7 months, vetting highly qualified candidates from across the nation and from overseas. The committee sought out and listened to voices from the Pitt community, students, faculty, staff, and alumni. Thousands participated in an online survey and in-person forums hosted last fall. This input was critical as the committee looked for the best person to carry on Pitt's traditions and lead us as we face a dynamic and exciting future. We are grateful and appreciate the hard work and many hours of which the search committee devoted to finding our next chancellor. They did an absolutely outstanding job. I also want to acknowledge Javette Washington, the Senior Vice Chancellor and Chief Legal Officer, who served as liaison to the search committee and the board throughout the process and made sure I didn't get too far off the reservation. As board chairperson, I would like to say what I would also like to say what I voiced so many times publicly and in private. My great admiration, respect, and appreciation for Chancellor Patrick Gallagher. Pat has been our chancellor since 2014. Under his leadership, Pitt has experienced tremendous gains in terms of our standing in the higher education community, our brand and our prestige, and our position as one of the great public research institutions in this country. He has ably led us through some very difficult times: the COVID-19 pandemic, an economic turndown, social upheavals, and uncertain and continually evolving landscape for higher education. His tenure has been marked by tremendous challenges, which, if not properly managed, could have negatively affected us in so many ways. And yet, today, Pitt has emerged smarter, stronger, a resilient university that is poised to further our growth and development to meet the needs of this community, the Commonwealth, the nation, and the world at large. Pat, your leadership is our legacy, and this university stands as a reflection of your many accomplishments and leadership. And now, with the search behind us and the future ahead of us, we have an opportunity to hear from the 19th Chancellor and Chief Executive Officer of the University of Pittsburgh, and the first woman in Pitt's 236-year history to hold his highest position, Chancellor-elect Joan T. Gable.
Thank you, Chair Browning, and thanks to all of you for being here. And I'm very sorry about my voice. It'll be part of the story going forward, I suppose. But I would like to add my thanks to Chairperson Browning and the entire Board of Trustees for their support and their oversight and governance of this wonderful institution. I want to thank Dr. Shaker and Eva Tansky-Bloom for stewarding a wonderful search committee that had broad representation from students, faculty, staff, board, and community members. I know what those processes are like, and I'm very grateful not only for the outcome, but for the way in which the journey was undertaken. And of course, I want to thank Chancellor Pat Gallagher, my friend, someone I can't imagine being more honored to follow. These are big shoes to fill, and I'm humbly grateful for the quality of the baton that I am being passed. I have had a very high opinion of the University of Pittsburgh for a very long time. I have seen it as a peer. You may know that Chancellor Gallagher was the recent chair of the AAU, the top research universities in the United States and Canada, created a very visible platform for the excellence at this institution that I tracked very closely in my previous role. But I've also seen it as a Pitt mom, which is a unique perspective that gives me and my husband, Gary, and our family a behind the curtain look at what a wonderful place this is for the value of academics, for the quality of the faculty and staff, but also for how we meet our students where they are in the classroom and beyond the classroom, and take advantage of this amazing location and this amazing community to create the best opportunity for what higher ed is and what it can be. And as the chairperson indicated, It's been a tough time to have those conversations, to see the future. There's been a lot going on. It has not been easy, but it's really times like these when you imagine what institutions are great and what institutions have the opportunity to be even greater. And thanks to the quality of the community, shared governance with faculty, staff, students, a really committed board, and the chancellor and his team's leadership, Pitt is absolutely emerging from this, as the chairperson said, smarter and stronger. There's so much exciting potential future opportunity. It is so nice to be looking at the future that way. And I'm absolutely honored and delighted to be here, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks. Chancellor Gallagher, would you like to make a few remarks?
Well, I just said, thank you. Let me just say it's a big relief today. Joan mentioned relay races and batons. So as you know, as I'm gasping for breath and holding the stitches in my side, I couldn't be more pleased to be giving the baton to a friend and colleague. Joan is even better than advertised. She's the real deal. She's coming from one of the premier public universities in the whole country to come to Pitt and do the same magic here. And I just couldn't be more excited. And all I can say, Pitt and Pittsburgh, you're going to love the Gables.
Okay, so now what we'd like to do is open it up for a few questions. Please.
Hi, I'm a public service. What do you intend to prioritize as you transition into the role and begin your first few months?
So in terms of setting priorities coming through the door, in the sort of grand strategic planning status of things, we have planned for Pitt, which is in really good shape and really coming to understand those priorities. But then on a personal level, really getting to know the community, the faculty, staff, and students, the leadership team, and understanding what's on the page with Plan for Pitt, which makes a lot of sense to me, what it means in the context of where we are and who we are, so that we can see how to bring that plan to life. So lots of listening and learning and getting to know, and then starting to execute.
Hi, I'm Sue at the University of Times. Why Pitt? You're coming from a much larger university. Why make the choice to move to a smaller, big university?
That's a good question. So the size of the campus, I mean, University of Minnesota is an incredible university, and it's been an absolute honor to be the president there. And there are a lot of really wonderful things happening there that I have been very humbled to be a part of. But the size of the university is really not the critical factor, at least from my point of view. I'm really focused on what the campus is doing in terms of research, where the voice of the constituencies are in terms of shared governance, how the governance works in relationship to the board, and what the student experience is like, and have a very personal connection to that I've been really just pleased by. And I know I speak for my husband too, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it's a totality of the different ways in which universities execute on their quality, what kind of community they create. And I really wanted to be a part of this one.
Paul Hoff from Pittsburgh Business Times. One of the parts of Chancellor Gallagher's tenure was drive to a commercialization of products, and some of the stuff that's the research firepower here. How do you view that, and what's your plan for continuing that or expanding on it?
Yes, so around commercialization and the idea of the role the university plays in the economic development of the community, I think that if you look back over time, there have been very few sustained, meaningful commercializations that didn't originate in one way or another through the innovation of university science and scholarship. And there are so many examples of that here, and many of the companies here are vaccines and other really notable turn the corner examples. I think that as we think about what's happening in higher ed broadly, and where it is that we as a community of learners and discoverers can make an impact, one of the critical ways we do that is in the way in which we are creative and innovative, serving and being applicable to the community at large. So that doesn't mean that basic science isn't relevant, doesn't mean that the arts aren't relevant. In fact, that's how you inspire the creativity. And then when we think about the innovations that have commercial potential, that we have the right internal structures to support that work, that we're supporting our faculty and staff and students in that work, and that we have the right partnerships and support in order to bring that work to the community. And so I think that's one of the ways that higher ed is evolving. And I think this community is one of the best potentials for really being a primary contributor in that space. Top 10 research university, top 25 public. If anyone can do it, it's here.
Right. Brother with the Pitt News. So Pitt's going through a pretty large scale unionization process all over campus. How do you plan to navigate the faculty, the staff, the professor compensation negotiations, as well as ongoing staff and grad student attempts at unionization?
Yeah, so the question is about unionization, and I will say that is happening on almost every university campus in one way or another around the country. I'm a in my bones believer in shared governance. And I think that the stakeholders and constituencies in shared governance should be able to come to the table, so to speak, in whatever form and with whatever voice they choose. And then our job as the administration and in the governance is to meet people where they are. And so I will come to the table in whatever form is ultimately asked of us, and we'll work together because I know we have the same ultimate goals.
Actually, this one back in before. When you presented your candidacy at the University of Pittsburgh, what was it about this university that you wanted to emphasize and lead in terms of the next decade specifically?
So the amazing thing that's happened under Chancellor Gallagher's leadership is the creation of the momentum. That the quality, I think, has always been there from everything I've understood, and as you might imagine, explored even further when I was considering this possibility. But you see moments in time in university campuses where they become accelerated in their research, in their student programs, in their reputation, in their impact, and dare I say it, in their rankings, as much as we talk about rankings these days. And all of that is happening here. There's an energy here that is the kind of thing that when you're looking at the commitment we make when we choose to work in higher education, that is fun to be a part of, even amidst difficult times and headwinds. And so I think for me, what I'm looking for is where opportunities align with my own personal strengths, where a community represents my values and what I think higher education can contribute to society at large, and where I know that faculty have what they need, or we're working together to get them what they need. Staff have what they need, or we're working together to get them what they need. And I know for a fact students have what they need, or we're working on getting them what they need. And I wanted to be a part of that.
And I have a follow-up question, this is for you as well as the chair. And I'll start with you, sir. Can you explain the process, take us through the process of how you reconcile the controversy behind the Chancellor-elect Gable at the University of Minnesota with serving on the board of the exchange?
Oh, yes, and actually, that issue was vetted through us, but actually, rather than have me respond to this, because the board and the search committee looked at those issues and we had a discussion. But I think it may be better if I allow you to respond to it, because I think you have more in-depth knowledge of it and you'll get a more detailed background. But we did vet that issue, as we did with every candidate that we looked at. We did a very extensive vetting process, and Anantha can speak to that in more detail, but we were aware and we vetted that issue. We felt we had a satisfactory response. And what you need to know is what happened in that instance is not unusual. Right now in Chancellor Gallagher's contract, there is a provision that allows him to serve on nonprofit and for-profit with the approval of the board. And so that's not an unusual process. It's not unusual to have presidents at major research universities having a clause like that in their employment agreement.
In your case, it compelled you to resign from that position.
I did, yes. So I'll walk you through it. So I had the same clause in my contract. My contract at the University of Minnesota specifically permitted service on a for-profit board. That contract was approved by what's called the Board of Regents in Minnesota, just like the board approves the contract here. I went through full conflict management. The university has a conflict management process like all universities do. The service on that specific board was approved by the conflict management board process. After that, it was approved by the board of the University of Minnesota. So full public transparent approval of the opportunity, but people didn't like it. I wouldn't call it a controversy. I would say they didn't like it, and it became a distraction. And so I stepped down.
In your time as president at the University of Minnesota, you cut back on the relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department. How do you plan to take what you learned during that time to Pitt, especially as there's growing concerns and disagreements about the role of the Pitt Police and the police in general within on-campus buildings?
So after George Floyd's murder, which I will remind everyone happened in the Twin Cities and was a national event by any measure and created a national call to action, the epicenter was just outside the figurative gates of the University of Minnesota. And so the university decided to, until the university was comfortable with the Minneapolis Police Department training process and discipline process, not use Minneapolis Police for what we call supplemental services. So when you have a large event and you hire extra officers, or if you have a big speaker, but we also doubled down on our commitment with Minneapolis Police to co-patrol adjacent neighborhoods because we have students, faculty, and staff living right next to campus, which is in the Minneapolis jurisdiction, and we wanted to have as much safety as possible. So it was a tenuous balance to strike, but one that we thought was important to strike in the aftermath of what were some obviously very difficult events and very challenging times for all of our community. The Minneapolis Police Department has gone through an incredibly reflective dive into their own processes from A to Z. There's a new police chief in Minneapolis, and we're very proud to work with them. We've restored that relationship with the shared commitment to having public safety and policing respect the values of our entire community, including our campus values, and doing everything we can together to keep everyone safe, both in terms of emergency or criminal response, but also in terms of making sure that their lived experience and diverse perspectives are represented in how we execute on those safety strategies.
Health and public safety was the #1 concern of undergrads and graduates in the survey this past summer at the university. The response you just gave, does it apply to that as well?
Yes, I think so. There's been a national uptick in crime across the United States, particularly in metropolitan areas. And those of us whose campuses are in metropolitan areas, and the University of Minnesota sits right in Minneapolis. I know exactly where this campus sits. I get the alerts, just like all of the parents do here. The hope is that crime is zero, and that every moment of every day is in a justifiably expected environment of safety. In the reality of what it is to live in an exciting metropolitan area with the job opportunities, with the entertainment opportunities, food and sports, comes all of the challenges associated with the metropolitan environment. And so it should be a concern. I don't know how it couldn't be a concern. And we as a community with all of the appropriate voices represented have to think about how we work together to address it.
There's a question.
You said that you're a Pitt mom. Does your child currently go here? What has your experience been like, being a Pitt mom, and did that influence at all your decision to leave the university?
So I will say my child currently goes here, but I won't say anything else at risk of not being invited to dinner tonight. But and so, yes, it was a big influence actually. So I will say, and I don't know if there are other parents in the room whose kids are at this age and who have college age students in their family. But I've worked in higher ed for decades now. And, you think you know what you're doing. You've been a faculty member, department chair, you've run programs, you've shown up to do the recruiting events, you've been to every game, all the things. And then you sit there with your baby, no matter how big they get, and watch them make what is one of the most transformational choices they'll ever make, that really sets the direction of who they are and what they have the potential to be. And it takes you right back down, all the way down to raw and hopeful and vulnerable. And all you want is for your kid to learn well and be happy and get what they need and have opportunities available to them. And that's what my child has had, is having, and I'm grateful. And I'm going to get emotional. I'm going to try to cut my answer off before I change the entire tenor of the conversation. I'm grateful. And it's a very big part of why I wanted to be here. Yes.
When I first met her, I thanked her for the contribution as a Pitt dad. I thanked her for the out-of-state contribution.
Full
she's
out-of-state
making-
tuition, ladies and
making
gentlemen.
to us.
Yes.
Okay, much appreciated.
Two last questions.
Yes. Recently, there's been much student concern and protest about speakers invited on campus by student groups. So how will you listen to student concerns and address and handle those controversial student groups?
Yes, so free speech on campus is obviously one of the issues of the day everywhere. There's no immunity from that. In fact, I think when you're located as beautifully as this campus is located, it also creates an attraction for all kinds of people. And sometimes those people are very controversial or provocative and actually may create pain for certain members of our community. And it has been arguably one of the hardest times in the history, the 1,000-year history of the model of higher education that we employ to strike the balance between challenging thought and making people think about things that they may not want to think about as part of what it is to be able to see both sides of an issue, multiple sides of an issue, hear another side, and thought that actually causes pain, while of course respecting that we live in a free country with an amendment to our Constitution that ultimately allows free speech. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do, first and foremost, is follow the law, obviously, but putting that to the side is to acknowledge and recognize when painful things happen, to provide the support and sometimes the counter position so that our community can receive balanced information, balanced opportunity to learn and work together, to make sure that we're very clear that while we respect and follow the law, we don't endorse as a community what people sometimes say, and that it is very difficult for those things to coexist. But that's part of what we're committed to as an institution of learning and exploration.
Yeah, looks like let me ask you about cost and student debt. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it was an issue in Minnesota, it's certainly an issue in Pennsylvania. What do you make of the state approach to funding higher education? And what do you hope to bring to the table to actually change that and do something about cost and student debt?
So the questions about cost and debt, and I will tell you, state related is an idiosyncratic status, and it is part of my learning curve is to fully understand it. But from where I am today, what you want, you start by thinking about price being competitive as a starting point, but we know that that isn't enough. And so I've been very pleased to see what Chancellor Gallagher and his team have done for students with the highest need, and making sure that you start with the highest need students and ensuring that they get what they need to reduce financial barriers to success. The very best investment, in my opinion, you can make is in a university or college degree. If you look at what it does to your life and to your long-term earning potential, but it shouldn't be a burdensome decision to make. I took on debt as a student. When I went to school, it was worth it, but it was manageable, and ideally becomes the least burden for those who have the highest risk of that burden. And then you move forward from there. In terms of partnering with the state and in Harrisburg, I would like them to fund the University of Pittsburgh more and better. You might not be surprised to hear that answer, but I want them to understand the value proposition, the return on investment, if you will, and why, if the university is better and better able to serve, the state is better and better able to serve. And that's a question of conversation and a lot of time together and making sure we tell our story well, because the story is absolutely there.
For generations on college campuses, including debt, women have been in the majority of students, clearly. And yet when they look to the office of power on their campuses, the presidents tend to be male, they tend to be white. And I'm wondering, what message do you hope that you will send to women on this campus, other non-white populations on this campus, by the fact that you have now risen to this position?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I really appreciate that question. And I think about this a lot, as you might imagine. It's not the first time that I am a first. And I am delighted to know that I am joining a very rapidly growing cadre of university leaders who are a wide variety of who represent a wide variety of identities. If you look at the national landscape, particularly with some pretty significant post-COVID turnover, there's a very beautiful spectrum of representation and people sitting in this chair across the country. But I would say that, I represent a certain part of all of the variety of identities that we would see in this community. But that what you would hope, looking at me and looking to my right and looking around the room, is that even if you don't see yourself represented in the chair you hope to occupy, that every time there's a little incremental movement forward, that it could be your turn next. And I hope it is. That's what I think all of us want. And all of us would hope that universities create for everyone who looks to us for leadership and guidance.
Happy to end there. We're running out of time because very tight schedule on the first day. But I can't promise that the Chancellor elect will have more time during campus, certainly in July, maybe more, get more. The TV like quick one-on-one campus, pretty good. Okay, all right. If anybody would like to pounce on the gentleman sitting in the corner, like Dr. Shaker with the search or Chancellor Gallagher's and more, available for a couple of questions. Otherwise, that's very good. Thank you very much.